This man vanished after testifying against the mob. A construction worker named Paul was driving home from work when he saw two men arguing on the sidewalk. He stopped to try to help, but soon realized that one of the guys had a gun and that this wasn't just a normal fight. He sped off, but the next day he saw the same thing and stopped again. The two men were still there and they both pulled out guns. Paul turned his car around and drove away faster than he had the day before. For the next week, he saw these men fighting, and almost every day they pulled out guns. This guy got fed up and decided he needed to report this to the police, but they didn't do anything about it, so he took matters into his own hands. He bought a shotgun and some ammo and waited for the perfect opportunity to strike, and when he finally got it, he blew both of their heads off. But where did he go after that? Was he caught by the cops? We don't know. But here are 10 cases where we do. Number 10. The last person to see Jimmy Hoffa alive. This is a case that has baffled authorities for decades now. Jimmy Hoffa was the powerful leader of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, who went missing in 1975. He was last seen at a restaurant outside Detroit, Michigan, and since then, there have been hundreds of theories about what happened to him. The most popular one being that he was killed by the Mafia. There have been dozens of people involved in the investigation into his disappearance. One of them was a construction worker named Anthony Gioccoloni. He was working at the restaurant on the day that Hoffa disappeared, when he testified against the mob in the early 1980s. He said that he had heard some truck drivers talking about a plan to kidnap Hoff and collect a ransom from the Teamsters Union. He claimed that he told the FBI about this, but they didn't want to hear it. So he took matters into his own hands and reported it to the newspaper columnist Jack Anderson instead. When the government started investigating Giacomo's story, they found out that he had lied about many things in the past, so they ignored his testimony. But in 2003, another witness came forward with the exact same story, claiming that Giacomo had told him about the kidnapping plot as well. The witness also claimed that he had heard the mob hit squad discussing how they would kill Hoff if he testified against them. Still, no action was taken. Giacomo died in 2006 without ever seeing justice done. No. 9. The informant who knew too much. In 2002, a man named Daniel Green testified against the Mafia in court. He had been an informant for the FBI since 1984 and had helped them to bring down several mobsters. But while he was on the stand, he said something that he shouldn't have. He talked about a secret listening device that the FBI had planted in the home of one of the mobsters. He also revealed information about other mobsters who were under surveillance. As soon as he was done testifying, he was arrested and charged with revealing state secrets. He tried to argue that he had only said what the FBI had told him to say, but the judge didn't buy it. He was sentenced to 30 months in prison. As soon as he was released, the FBI put him into witness protection because they knew that the mob wanted him dead. They gave him a new name, social security card, and driver's license. They also put him on a new street with other witnesses whose names were also changed. However, someone from the mob must have followed him to his new home because in 2007, he was shot in front of his house. He survived the attack, but he was forced to testify anonymously behind a curtain in subsequent trials. Number 8. Witness in a Mafia murder trial. In 1985, a Mafia captain named Thomas Bellotti was found guilty of murdering a rival mobster. There were several witnesses in the case, but one of them stood out more than the rest. His name was Salvatore Greco, and he had been a friend of the victim. He identified the killer as Bellotti in court, and the jury agreed. After the trial, Bellotti was sentenced to 50 years in prison. However, Greco soon found himself in danger. The mob wanted revenge for their friend's murder, and they were looking for someone to blame. They had already killed one witness in the case, so they weren't afraid to kill more. Greco went into hiding, but the mob found him anyway. They beat him up and threatened him, telling him that if he didn't recant his testimony, they would kill him. The government wanted to protect Greco, but they didn't do a good job. He was arrested twice on drug charges. In 1990, he was arrested again for trying to buy a gun. When the judge found out that he was a witness in a mob trial, he let him go. But that same year, Greco was murdered. He had been shot 5 times in the head. The mob had finally gotten to him. Number 7. A cop who went too far. Detective Joseph D. Donofrio worked for the New York Police Department for 18 years. He had a reputation for being tough, and he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. That all changed in 1982 when he testified against the Mafia. He had been investigating a mobster named Anthony Salerno, aka Fat Tony. Salerno had been running a crew of hijackers who were stealing millions of dollars worth of goods from trucks and trains. D'Onofrio had been tracking him for months, and he finally had enough evidence to arrest him. But when he testified against Salerno in court, he revealed more information than he should have. He talked about secret police operations and undercover informants. He also revealed the name of a confidential informant who had given him information about Salerno's crew. As soon as D'Onofrio was done testifying, he was called into the captain's office. He was suspended without pay, and then he was arrested on charges of misconduct and bribery. It turned out that the confidential informant had been paying him $1,000 a month in exchange for information. D'Onofrio was convicted and sentenced to 6 months in prison. When he was released, he was put into witness protection. He changed his name and moved to Florida. But the Mafia found him anyway. In 1985, he was shot in the face, but he survived the attack. He continued to testify against the Mafia until 2002, when he retired. 6. The informant who turned on his friends. In 2009, 4 men were arrested for planning to rob a bank in St. Louis, Missouri. One of the men was Charles Pretty Boy. While he was in jail awaiting trial, he met an FBI informant named William Smokey Sanders. Sanders convinced Floyd to turn against his friends and testify in the upcoming trial. When Floyd took the stand, he identified his friends as the ones who had planned the robbery. All 3 of them were convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. But after the trial, Floyd disappeared. The FBI found out that he had been living in Las Vegas using a false identity. He had also married one of the daughters of a Las Vegas crime boss. When the FBI confronted Floyd, he said that he had turned against his friends because he didn't want to go to prison. He also said that he was in witness protection, but that wasn't true. The FBI arrested him and charged him with bank robbery. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. 5. The witness who saw too much. In 2001, a man named Dominic Polisoto was shot in front of his house. He survived the attack, but he had no idea who was responsible. He told the police that he didn't know anything about the shooting, and he wasn't able to identify the shooter. However, a neighbor had seen the entire thing, and she told the police that she saw a man named Michael Franzese shoot Polizuto. Franzese was a member of the Genovese crime family, and he had been arrested several times on drug charges. The police wanted to question him about the shooting, but he refused to cooperate. They arrested him for contempt of court and threw him in jail. A few days later, Polizuto was released from the hospital, and he told the police that he had been shot by a member of the Genovese crime family. He also said that he had been harassed by the mob in the past, but he didn't know why. The police now had enough evidence to charge Franzese with attempted murder. However, Polizuto disappeared before the trial. No one knows what happened to him, but it's believed that the mob killed him to keep him from testifying against Franzese. 4. The man who knew too much about the Bonanno crime family. Philip Rusty Rustelli was a member of the Bonanno crime family, one of the 5 families that make up the Mafia in the United States. He joined the family in the 1970s and quickly rose through the ranks. In the 1980s, he became the capo regime, or captain of a crew that was responsible for racketeering, extortion, and murder. However, in 1988, he was arrested on drug charges and sentenced to 10 years in prison. While he was in prison, he turned informant for the FBI and testified against several members of his old crime family. In 1992, he was released from prison and put into witness protection. But the Bonanno crime family wanted revenge. They'd already killed one of their own to send a message to the others, and they wanted to make sure that Rusty understood that he was in danger. They sent him a box in the mail with a dead cat and a note that read, "Next time, it will be you." The government tried to protect Rusty, but they couldn't keep him safe. In 1993, he was shot in the chest, but he survived the attack. He continued to testify against the Mafia until 1998, when he was murdered. He had been shot in the back of the head and left in an alley. The Bonanno crime family had finally gotten their revenge. 3. A witness in a murder trial. In 2004, a man named Frank, the German Tiger, was murdered in a Brooklyn parking lot. Several people witnessed the murder, but no one was willing to testify against the killer. The police had very little evidence to go on, but they had one lead. They had a security camera that had captured the license plate number of the getaway car. The problem was, the owner of the car had already come forward and claimed that he had been carjacked. The police didn't believe him, but they didn't have any way of proving that he was lying. Then a witness came forward and said that she had seen the owner of the car at the crime scene. She had been too afraid to testify before, but now that there was evidence to back her up, she was willing to come forward. The man was arrested and charged with murder. But during the trial, the witness disappeared. The police searched for her everywhere, but they couldn't find her. They eventually learned that she had gone into hiding and was living under a false identity. She was afraid that the Mafia would kill her if she testified, so she decided to run away instead. The police didn't blame her. They understood that she was in danger, but they also needed her to testify. If not, they wouldn't be able to convict the killer. The witness eventually agreed to testify anonymously from behind a curtain. No, too, a woman who knew too much. Mary Ellen Moe O'Connor was a member of the Gambino crime family. She was the wife of a mobster named Anthony Tough Tony Rinaldi. The couple lived in a luxurious mansion in Long Island, New York. They had a lot of money, but they didn't earn it honestly. They made most of their money through extortion and racketeering. However, in 1986, Tough Tony was arrested on drug charges and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Mary Ellen was left to fend for herself. She was being blackmailed by one of her husband's former associates. He was threatening to tell the police that she was involved in the drug operation, desperate to protect her family's reputation. Mary Ellen turned informant for the FBI. She testified against several members of the Gambino crime family and helped to bring down several of their illegal operations. However, the Mafia never forgot what she had done. In 1991, she was shot in the face, but she survived the attack. She continued to testify against the Mafia until 1994 when she was murdered. She had been shot in the head and left in an alley. Number 1. The man who brought down the Genovese crime family. Anthony Tough Tony Federici was a soldier in the Genovese crime family. He had been arrested several times on drug charges, but he was always able to avoid prison. That all changed in 1991 when he was arrested on racketeering charges. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While he was in prison, he turned informant for the FBI and testified against several members of his old crime family. However, the Mafia never forgot what he had done. In 1996, he was released from prison and put into witness protection. The government gave him a new identity and relocated him to a different state. But the Genovese crime family was able to track him down. In 1999, he was shot in the chest, but he survived the attack. He continued to testify against the Mafia until 2002 when he was murdered. He had been shot in the head and left in an alley. Thanks for watching. See you next time.